Welcome to Tea and Tarot with me, your host, Yashna. Each week I'll share what I've learned as I dive deeper into the world of tarot. I've got my cards in front of me, my cup of tea, and I can't wait to share this journey with you. This is Tea and Tarot. Welcome back to Tea and Tarot. This week we're going to start breaking down the Major Arcana, starting with the Fool. As it happens, I also just celebrated Diwali this past week, or at least the past week of when this episode will air. For anyone who doesn't know, Diwali is the festival of lights and is a major celebration of light triumphing over darkness. It's a chance to reflect on the past year, celebrate good times with your friends and family, and welcome in the new year. In my family, we pray to Lakshmiji, who is the goddess of wealth and prosperity, and to Ganeshji, who is the god of wisdom and removing obstacles, to bless our upcoming year. I mention this in part because I've always loved Diwali, and it's always been a huge part of my life growing up, and also because, as I mentioned in the last episode, the Fool is my Lightseer card, so that also holds a special place in my heart, and both are representative of new beginnings. It fills me with joy, and it's just such a nice coincidence that this episode coincides with when Diwali just happened this past year, and I can kind of share the lessons and meanings from both of these together. So with that, let's start talking about the Fool. As we talked about over the Fool's journey, the Major Arcana cards take you on a journey that start with 0, the Fool, and go through number 21, the World. As such, the Fool is very representative of new beginnings, new journeys, fresh starts. It's numbered 0, so it comes even before beginning the journey. It's representative of how you are and who you are at your starting point before you even take that first step. In some decks, the Fool is also referred to as the Jester or the Idiot as well. Looking back at some of the history of tarot decks in general, in the older Tarot de Marseille, the Fool was titled Le Mot, which means madman or beggar. In the Visconti Sforza tarot decks, he was generally depicted as a vagabond or beggar with ragged clothes and just a stick as his only possession. In some other interpretations, he's seen as a true fool with the jester's hat, but generally follows the theme of someone with meager to no belongings. This seemed to be the case with most French-suited decks, similar to the Joker in a typical 52 card playing deck that we use now. In the Rider-Waite tarot deck, he carries a stick with a small bag with all his possessions, but the Fool is more symbolically walking towards the edge of a cliff, representing the general themes of this card, which is walking into the unknown and taking a risk. Historically, the Fool has always remained unnumbered, with the exception of some labeling it 0, which has now become its more common number. The Fool likely influenced the Joker used in other card decks, but the Joker may have also evolved independently. Not 100% certain. So looking at my own cards, and for anyone who is just listening along, you can very easily Google the images of these cards, and I will also be posting a picture of them on my story so you know what I was talking about in this episode. But before me, I have 2 different Fool cards. I have the one from my Lightseers deck, and then I also have the one from the Rider-Waite deck. Actually, let me pull out the one from the Rider-Waite deck. It's been a while since I've cracked open this deck. Unfortunately, it seems I've misplaced the Fool from my Rider-Waite deck. I don't know if that means something or not, but it is probably somewhere in my apartment because this deck is much older. I've had it for a really long time, and I've really not practiced with it at all in the last 5 years or so, so there's a good chance a card or 2 got misplaced. Anyways, shameful revelation. Anyways, looking at the cards that I do have in front of me, I have a picture of it pulled up. In the Lightseers deck, there is a young woman standing over the edge of a cliff with a purple gem-looking thing in one hand and a stick or staff in her other hand. She has her eyes closed as she leans over the edge of the cliff, almost as if she might fall over, but is still grounded in her spot. She wears a bright yellow dress, and in the water or ground below her is a whorl, WHORL, which is a pattern of circles that forms a flower-looking shape. So that is what it looks like on the Lightseers deck. On the Rider-Waite deck, you see a young man standing similarly at the edge of a cliff with a white rose in one hand and a stick with a small bag of his possessions in the other. There's a white dog by his side as he stares off at the distance and a bright sun shedding light from the top of the card. As I mentioned, I don't have a detailed guidebook for all the symbols for the Fool in the Lightseers deck. I can make some guesses about what some of the symbols might mean, and I'm super excited to get the extended guidebook, which might shed more details on that. But for now, I can share a lot more of what the symbols in the Rider-Waite deck portray using a book that I have called The Ultimate Guide to Tarot by Liz Dean. There's a lot of great notes about the symbols. It feels like too much information for me, honestly. So I'm not going to share everything that's in there, just some of the pieces that I think are more relevant. Starting with some of the different symbols, the white dog by the young man's side represents self-preservation. The dog is trying to warn the man he's about to go off a cliff, but he continues on. The white rose symbolizes innocence and purity, which is what I think the purple gem in the Lightseers deck likely symbolizes as well, is just innocence, naivety, purity at the start of your journey. In the Rider-Waite deck, the bag on the end of his stick is just his essentials and supposedly also contains the 4 suits we will see throughout the Minor Arcana. In the Lightseers deck, there is no bag visible at the end of her stick, so it really is symbolic of her starting her journey with just what she has on her and not carrying any of her material possessions as she continues on. In both cards, there is a really bright background, and in the Rider-Waite deck, the sun is illuminating the world that the Fool is about to step into. And in the Rider-Waite deck specifically, there is a red feather in his cap that represents his life force. And some of these different symbols that appear in this card will appear again in subsequent cards, kind of carrying the themes that they represent. And I'm not as sure about the Lightseers deck because I haven't really dug into all of the symbols in them and seeing how they carry through the deck, but it's very likely it's a similar story there. I'm going to take a very quick break, and when I am back, we are going to start jumping into all the different interpretations of the Fool. We're back, and let's talk about the Fool and what it really means. I've kind of mentioned this already, but the highest level general message that the Fool depicts is to leap but look first. From the Lightseers deck, the message that Chris Ann has associated with this card is, I am ready for this adventure down my soul path. The Fool is generally a positive card indicating new beginnings and fresh opportunities. You're likely on the verge of an exciting, unexpected new adventure. It could be a literal adventure, or it could be something more emotional or mental, something you're going through internally. It will take you on a path where you may need to take a leap of faith, but you'll grow from it, and you need to make yourself more vulnerable to change and approach what's coming without too many things holding you back, keeping an open mind as you walk through it. When the Fool is read in its reverse position, the shadow seer side, it usually indicates to really look before you leap. It could mean that you're being reckless, careless, neglecting something, you don't have hope or faith that it's going to work out, or you may be acting a bit irrational. It may indicate fear of something new or hesitation to really start your journey. So those are the things to really keep in mind when you see the Fool in the reverse meaning. Now, that's the general high-level interpretation. And you can always take that general meaning and apply it to whatever question or whatever you're trying to answer with that reading. There are some more specific meanings you can also associate based on the general theme of the reading. As I was doing a reading for my friend, I kind of mentioned this to her, but there are different categories of readings you can do, and this is just super broad and definitely doesn't encompass everything. But generally, people want a reading about love and relationships, money and career, health, or their spirituality and the path they're taking there. So there are some more meanings that can be applied to each of those categories to make it a more specific reading. So when talking about love and relationships, a fool in love is exciting, spontaneous, and fickle. For existing relationships, it could mean going on the next step or going on the next journey that naturally evolves from a relationship, or evaluating a lack of commitment and not being willing to take that next step together. For single people, it could indicate an impulsive, carefree romance is on the cards and on the horizon. It could mean that the relationships in your life now or the relationships coming up will likely be something more fun rather than a deeper, true connection. In its Shadow Seer reading, it could indicate that the current pursuit of love may be holding you from something genuine or what you actually want, and you might be focusing more on the excitement of the relationship than forming a deeper connection. It could also indicate insecurity or leaving a relationship on rocky ground. When looking at this card for money and career readings, the Fool is very representative of starting a new career path or business. It reminds you to be patient even if others don't understand what you're doing and to continue on that journey. It could also mean approaching something with renewed energy or looking for new paths of advancement, new avenues, new ways to spark your interest in what you're doing. In the Shadow Seer reading, it's more cautionary to do your homework and be cautious with new ventures. You might be acting recklessly or about to act recklessly and may not be confident enough to speak your ideas. When we look at this card for health, it could mean that you're being accident prone, so you should be careful. It could represent pregnancy as a new beginning of life. It can also be that you're going to have this big bout of vitality and energy if you're recovering from an illness. In the Shadow Seer reading, it usually indicates to look for alternate treatments if something isn't working. It, again, also indicates you might be accident prone, so to be careful. If you're reading this card for spirituality, it is the Fool. It is about new journeys, and it very much means that too, and that you are on the beginning of a new spiritual journey for yourself, even if you don't fully understand it, and even if others don't understand it. Shadow Seer means something very similar, but might be more indicative of you needing to look for a new path. So those are all the different ways to really read the Fool. Before kind of wrapping up this information on the Fool, I do have some other random trivia that I learned as I was doing some research into this card. So I have mentioned in the history of tarot that it used to be a card game. So all of these characters existed when people played cards with them more casually. So the Fool had a slightly different use case when playing the traditional card games versus when you used this deck for readings. Originally, it was seen as a card independent of the trump cards and suit cards, and was one of the most valuable ones since it often trumped everything else. It could also be used as a quote-unquote excuse card. Tarot card games were often trick-taking games. Individual rounds were played, and there were winners for each of those individual rounds. In the use case of an excuse, the Fool can be played so that you do not have to play another card and could then allow the user to discard a useless card or gain one depending on how that round generally went with everyone else playing. A little bit confusing, but basically just one of the most valued cards for the game. In other versions, the Fool could be played as the highest or the lowest card, similar to how the Ace is perceived in a lot of card games today. It was also often used as a wild card that could be played as anything, which is pretty similar to how the Joker is used in a lot of playing decks now. So that is pretty much all the content that I have about the Fool. It's just one card, but holds so much meaning. And as I was reading through the Ultimate Guide to Tarot book, there is a spread in there that is specifically around the Fool. And given that this is going to coincide with the Bali week and the Fool is all about new beginnings, I've decided I'm going to do a reading specifically around the start of this podcast and see what to keep in mind and what I might face as I'm rolling this out more. So I'm going to take another short break, and when I'm back, I'll be doing that tarot reading. And we're back. As I mentioned before, I am going to be doing a reading specifically with the Fool as kind of a focus point or kind of a grounding point for the reading. So I've pulled the Fool out of my deck. I've already shuffled it a little bit, but I'm going to shuffle it again with my question in mind. For anyone watching along, this is kind of the spread that I'm going to be doing, but I will be talking through it a lot as well. I have it in my periphery for reference. So I'm going to start by shuffling my cards. And as I'm shuffling them, I am really thinking about this podcast. I want to know how my podcast is going to do, things to keep in mind so it's successful, what could be a risk or an obstacle in my way, just kind of a general, how's it going to go? What should I keep in mind as I go on this crazy, scary, exciting journey? Okay, so for this reading, I am going to be drawing 5 cards instead of the typical 3 card spreads I've been doing till now. This is the first time I'm doing this spread, by the way, so it's really interesting to me. I have no idea how it's going to turn out. So we are on this adventure together. So because I am going to be drawing 5 cards, I'm going to generally just fan out my cards, and I am just going to pick 5 from the batch. So I'm going to do card 1, which, card 1 goes down here for you and your situation. Card 2 is the risk. Card 3 is the potential rewards. Card 4 is what you can gain. And card 5 is advice and likely outcome. So I'm going to put the rest of these cards to the side really quick. this will be a much bigger reading. It's more cards than I've ever read for myself in a single setting. So I'm going to start flipping the cards over. Card 1 is you and your situation, which is the Knight of Swords. I have no idea what that means. The second card is risks. The Empress. That doesn't feel very risky to me. I really like the Empress card. Card 3 is what you can gain, which is this one. That one is the Four of Wands upside down. Interesting. Card 4 is what you can gain, which is the Ten of Swords. And then card 5, which is advice and likely outcome, is the Hierophant upside down. I am going to need to consult the guidebook before I do my full digest on this reading, but off the bat, I am very curious about how this reads. I pulled 2 more Major Arcana outside of the Fool already focusing this reading, which is really interesting. It is kind of fitting of I'm trying to ask about this new journey I'm going on and this major new project I'm undertaking that I'm very excited about. So having 2 Major Arcana for that is pretty representative. All of the images do kind of appeal to me and feel like they represent, they feel like they can reflect this current situation, but I am going to consult my guidebook to get a bit more information on what exactly all of these cards mean, and then I will be right back to share out my reading. This is kind of cool. I like this spread. Okay, I'm back. I took some time to look at the different meanings of these cards, and off the bat, I need to say I'm a little spooked by how spot on a lot of these messages feel. It just all seems really relevant, and also maybe it's a little bit of confirmation bias, but they all kind of share messages that I want to hear in this moment as I'm thinking about this path I'm going on and how this podcast might progress over time. So yeah, it's just really nice. Anyways, let me break down the meaning. So like I said, this is a 5-card spread. So I will be going through each of the cards and then kind of summarizing the overall meaning. The Fool sits next to me, and we already talked a lot about what that card means today in the episode. The first card drawn is representative of me and my situation, and for that one, I drew the Knight of Swords. The Knight of Swords really represents running towards your success. He's determined and passionate and is moving forward with a fierce intensity in order to achieve his goals. There's a lot of streamlining, decision-making, ambition, being assertive, and trying to be successful in what you're doing. One of the messages that comes with this card is to strive for excellence every single day in order to achieve your goals and really bring the magic you need into your life. The overall Light Seer's message is, I move quickly to help others, and as I do, my dream expands. That feels very spot on for where I'm at right now, which is I'm just trying to hit the ground running with this podcast. I'm trying to record as much content as I can. I've been working on my logo, my intro, the music in the background, just everything all at once. And in the last 3 to 4 weeks, it feels like it's all finally coming together, but it very much feels like I'm just running headfirst into this entire project with no real knowledge of how it's going to turn out. But I have been spending time every single day trying to make it happen. So yes, very representative of that. The second card I drew is the Empress, and this card is representative of the risks I face going into it. Generally, the Empress is a positive card and means that things are going well overall. It does represent something new, birthing a new idea, or creating something which aligns with this. And because this one is really supposed to be more focused on the risks, I decided to read it more in the shadow seer position and understand what it would mean if I look more at the lessons learned from the card rather than just the light side. And the card does remind you to take care of yourself and not be overwhelmed by your emotions or overwhelmed by what's going on. You're nurturing something else, but don't let that take away from the care and attention you also need to give to you. So I take this as meaning some of the risks as I step into this is overexerting myself, putting in all of my energy and excess time that I have into this podcast, and not really having anything left to give myself for self-care. And that's something I will need to continue to bake in and make sure I'm doing. The third card drawn is the Four of Wands, and this card is in the spot for potential rewards and what I might get out of it, which is really funny because the Four of Wands is the card representing celebration, hitting a milestone. It really represents having more stability and harmony after you've gone through a state of rapid expansion, rapid awakening. So it really speaks well as this could be the state I reach with this podcast where it does well, or at least I reach a state where it feels stable and it feels consistent and I'm no longer wondering what's going to happen every day. As this card is in the shadow seer position, there are some lessons to keep in mind. So it's really helping remind me that I should remain connected with the people around me, stay devoted to the work that I'm doing and the reason that I'm doing this. And as I do that, I will be able to celebrate a lot more of the little things along the way. And if I hit a huge milestone in the future, I will have a great community to celebrate that with. The fourth card I drew is the Ten of Swords, and this card is what you can gain. This one was a little interesting to me reading through it because the Ten of Swords is more representative of painful endings and generally talks more about being stabbed in the back, which is not something I hope to gain from this podcast. But the lighter lesson that comes out of it is having an opportunity to find healing and an opportunity to find hope and resiliency in your path forward. Out of some darkness, there is light, and as you continue to follow that light, you are healing every day. And how I take that as I think about what I can gain from this podcast is that there are definitely things that I am healing from now, but even as I continue on this path, as I deal with hardships, I will have this podcast to kind of help support me. It will give me something to do, and doing these tarot readings regularly through the podcast can even help me reflect and understand what I'm going through in that moment and how to really face it and move forward. So it will be an opportunity to help me continue to heal over time as I just keep doing this. And then the last card I drew, the fifth one, is the Hierophant, which is representative of advice and likely outcome. And that just also fits because the Hierophant is literally about finding a leader, finding a guide, having a guru. It's about keeping an open mind as you're learning new things. It was pulled in the shadow seer position. So the lessons that come with it being in the reverse position is to not feel stagnant in the way you think. Don't be stubborn with your ideas. Really keep an open mind and seek knowledge from those around you, looking to looking to seek new perspectives and new teachers in your life. And as I've been going through the first few episodes of this, I feel like I really am learning a lot, and it's a good reminder to just keep an open mind as I go through this, because I have no idea what all I'll learn doing all the research I've been doing online, reading on the different cards, connecting with them more, and hopefully as these episodes release, I'll also hear from some people listening in who have other thoughts as well. So that's the whole reading spread. Overall, I think the message really resonates with me as I'm stepping into this podcast. I'm currently diving into it headfirst, working every single day to achieve success. And as I do that, I need to remember to continue to take care of myself, celebrate and focus on the small things along the way instead of what this podcast might look like a year from now or 2 years from now. Take it as an opportunity to heal and grow myself and really learn new things. Wow. I was just saying this is part of the opportunities that come with doing this podcast, but it really feels enlightening and very heartwarming to have done this reading, and these are the cards that I pulled out from it. And it makes me feel hopeful as I'm doing this. I'm so excited to be doing this research. It's been really cool to learn so many new things already as I've been recording these first episodes. I am extremely nervous, but so excited for when these finally get released, and I will be able to maybe hear back from others listening in. Of course, this is, episode number 4. So you're listening to this and you're like, oh my gosh, this has already been out for a bit, but this is still very new and fresh to me, and I'm just so excited that my cards seem to align with what I needed to hear today. So, anyways, that's my tarot reading. That's my spread with the Fool as a focus on the outside. I don't know if having the Fool next to the cards really changed which ones got pulled during it, but it does feel like it helped channel the reading. Or not channel, but helped focus the reading a lot more, which is really cool. So I might have to try one of these again in the future when there's a card that really speaks to me. But thanks for listening to my long, rambly understanding of my own spread and how I feel it applies to me right now.
Thank you for listening to Tea and Tarot with Yashna. This episode was produced, hosted, and edited by me, Yashna Bunsell, and brought to you by Tea Time Podcasts. The tarot reading was done using the Lightseers deck by Chris Ann, and all card visuals are from the Lightseers deck and the Rider-Waite-Smith tarot deck. Music was made using SoundRaw. Research was done using The Ultimate Guide to Tarot by Liz Dean, the Lightseers Guidebook, Wikipedia, and TarotGuide.com. Join me next week for another episode of Tea and Tarot.